Well, hello, welcome back. Good to be together. You can't see him, I don't think. Come up here. Come up here. Come up here. But my dog interrupted me just as I pushed the button to start the video, wanting some attention. So I'll do that first, and then I'll tell him to go lie down. Good boy. Good boy. So we're reading from the Jesus Storybook Bible, a Bible that tells a children's Bible that tells the story in ways that make it clear that all the stories, especially from the Old Testament, are pointing to one child, one special person. Last time we looked at this, or last few times, we looked at the story of Joseph and how his relationship with his brothers, how they were mad at him, how they sold him, how he became prince in Egypt and was able to save his family from famine. And last time we looked at God starting a rescue plan because Joseph and his brothers, his whole family, ended up stuck in Egypt. And so God starts to make a way for them to get out, to get free. And so that very night, this is how that story ended. Moses and God's people fled out of Egypt and out of slavery. They were free at last. God's people would always remember this great rescue and call it Passover. But an even greater rescue was coming, the story told us. So here's another step, another story towards that rescue. This one is called God Makes a Way. And in the Bible, it's found in Exodus 14 and 15. And it's about Moses and the Red Sea. Moses and God's people escaped out of Egypt and into the wilderness. They did not know the way, but God knew the way, and he would show them. I will bring you to a new home, a special land, God promised them. I will look after you. I am with you. God sent a big cloud for them to follow, a pillar of smoke stretching up to the sky, and it moved in front of them as they walked and shaded them from the blazing heat of the day. And when it was time to rest, it stopped. All through the cold desert nights, it kept them warm, glowing like fire. God led his people through the desert to the edge of a great sea. They were just wondering how to cross it when suddenly they heard a terrible thundering and pounding. It sounded almost like horses' hooves. They shaded their eyes and turned and looked back and screamed. It was horses. Pharaoh and his army were coming to get them. Pharaoh had changed his mind again. Get my slaves back, he screeched and charged out into the desert after them with 600 of his fastest horsemen and every single chariot in Egypt. And so here's a picture of a horse, a chariot, and an archer standing in the chariot, ready to attack the people of God. What were God's people going to do? In front of them was a big sea. It was so big there was no way around it, but there was no way through it. It was too deep. And they didn't have any boats, so they could sail across or row even across. And they couldn't swim across because it was too far and they would drown. And they couldn't turn back because Pharaoh was chasing them. They could see the glinting swords now, flashing in the baking sun, and the dust clouds, and chariot after scary chariot surging towards them. So they did the only thing that was left to do. Panic! We're gonna die, they shrieked. Don't be afraid, Moses said. But there's nothing we can do, they screamed. God knows you can't do anything, Moses said. God will do it for you. Trust him and watch. But there's no way out, they cried. God will make a way, Moses said. Another minute and it would have been all over. But then the strangest thing happened. But first I'll show you a picture of them standing at the edge of the great sea with the chariots coming and panicking about what to do. God made the pillar of smoke move. It moved behind the people and hid them from the Egyptians. Then God sent a strong wind, an east wind, to blow all night long. It blew on the water of the big sea. It blew it to the left and it blew it to the right until it blew it into two towering walls of water. And there, right through the middle of the sea, a muddy kind of pathway opened up. And God's people walked across on dry land. And so here's a picture the artist made of what that might have been like. And so you can see the path going down the middle, and you can see Moses starting to lead the people through that path with water kind of piled up on each side. There's a construction site next door, and every now and then, you might have just heard it, they start up a generator, but I'm going to keep going, hoping the microphone isn't picking that up. When the Egyptians tried to follow them across the muddy path, the walls of water crashed back down on them and swallowed them up. God's people were safe. They danced and laughed and sang and thanked God. When there had been no way that they could see, God found a way to make them safe. So there they're laughing and dancing on the other side. Many years later, once again, God was going to make a way where it wasn't obvious that there was a way. From the very beginning, in all the stories we've read from this book, God's people, God's children, had been running and from him and hiding. God knew his children could never be happy without him. But they couldn't get back to him by themselves. They were lost. They didn't know the way back, and they didn't know how to find it either. But God knew the way. And one day, he would show them. And that's the end of that chapter. I'll put the bookmark in, and I will close the book and put it back on the shelf and switch my glasses and say to you, do you know what I'm going to say? What have I been saying? Shalom and serenity until we meet again. You're right.